Hello and welcome back to another episode of your favourite educational podcast. In today's episode, I wanted to tell you everything that is more important than fashion. So we've talked a lot about the source, a popular word on this channel to mean aura, swag. I can't think of any others. We normally talk about it in terms of fashion, of course, because that's generally why we gather here today on days like these. However, I also often say that fashion, it's not just an aesthetic appeal. That's why we name it the source. Source. That's why we name it source. It's not just made up of its aesthetic components. It's an all-encompassing sensory, emotional appeal. And I wanted to explore that today by actually taking out the fashion aspect of the source and try and dissect what we need to work on before we start picking an outfit. Because I do believe that actually there are more important things. Probably not great marketing for this channel. Please keep watching anyway. Because I want to buy an island.
Oh. That's it, I'm not going.
First, I wanted to talk about the source. I think source is a great term for it because there are ingredients to it. And the problem is that when you farm your ingredients from TikTok, it all gets rather complicated.
More people should dress their labubus. Also come with a hat, but today it's sunny, so she don't need one.
There's many avenues and everyone is trying to prove a point. Everyone's trying to prove a point either to the audience and try and get followers or prove a point to brands. In neither case is it authentic. And that's why you just get people wearing layers and layers of clothes because they want to tag every brand they can, type beat. That's why everything looks a little bit complicated, and that's when you get a rather artificial tasting sauce. What you want is simpler than that. It's going to be simpler than that. Nonna's tomato puttanesca, the Italian word for, I think it's whore, translated to whore. I might need to fact check that. Yes. What was I saying? Oh, Nonna's sauce, yes. The tomato ketchup in the bottle that lasts for 10 years on the shelf is going to have far more E numbers in it than Nonna's tomato sauce. Nonna might put in her sauce tomatoes, olive oil, and salt. So let's say for ease, for simplicity, our sauce comprises of 3 ingredients: physical, emotional, and behavioural. Within the physical, we of course have fashion. Please go and watch my previous material if you wish to brush up your knowledge on that. But within the physical component, we also have physical appearance, raw physical appearance, voice, fragrance, and gait are the things that I have identified within the physical component of the sauce. We have emotional components, which may include confidence, composure, and mystery. And finally, we have behavioral components, which may include things such as social awareness, authenticity, charisma, and consistency. These are not components of a human being. These are essential for the sauce. The sauce is like an elevated human being. I feel like I'm going to get myself in trouble saying that. Regarding these 3 ingredients, you will judge someone first by their physical components than by their behavioural, simply because that is what is manifesting first. You see someone across the room, you don't know their political views. Maybe. Maybe that's a bad example. You see someone across the room, you don't know their favourite flavour of ice cream. And if you're allergic to strawberries and that person's favourite flavour of ice cream is strawberry, there's an incompatibility there. However, you do not come across that without experiencing the physical first. So you have on Love Island and people say,
I don't have a type. I don't go for looks. I just want someone funny.
You're not going to find out if they're funny if you don't like the way they look, is the reality of it. Looking at these, what does every highly sourced person have? Not everyone who has sauce looks the same. What is the common denominator between everyone who has sauce? I'm going to have to break these down to the raw components. And I have. These can be broken down to your basic needs, your psychological needs, and your self-fulfillment needs. The physical is your basic need because this is what you're going to judge someone by first. You're not going to get to the other stages without judging someone by the physical. Source is different to attraction, okay? So source is someone being cool, right? Attraction is sort of sexually appealing to someone, okay? These are different things, and maybe I'll talk about that in a different episode. But for someone to have sauce, they still must have that physical element to them. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't have many friends, so anyway, on a hierarchy, you have your basic needs, your psychological needs, and your self-fulfillment needs. You need that person to be clean. If someone smells really bad, you're not going to make the next move. This is very easy to fix by being clean. Take showers, wear deodorant. The next need, the psychological needs, are they need to be nice. If someone is not nice, it doesn't matter if they're clean, you're not going to want to be their friend. Similarly, if they're not nice, you're not going to want to go on to the next stage. You are not going to sit around and find out if they have other admirable qualities. It is fundamental that someone is nice to you. And if they're not, don't be their friend. Finally, at the top of this hierarchy, once you have discovered that someone is clean and they're nice to you, they then also need to be cool. And looking at this hierarchy, being cool doesn't mean that you're not nice. You can be nice and uncool. You can be clean and uncool. But you can't have the sauce and be uncool. Unfortunately. The colloquialism on the streets is the ick. A lot of people may say. I think the ick is the manifestation of someone being clean and nice, perfect on paper, yet just not being cool. Being cool is a fundamental ingredient to the sauce. These are our fundamental components of the sauce. In this video, I thought it would be easiest to navigate the physical. Again, this is everything you have to get right before the outfit. And again, there are also other components, including emotional and behavioral components of the sauce. However, I think it is a lot easier to change physical appearance and also a lot easier to teach, learn, educate on physical appearance than it is to educate on how to be mysterious. I can tell you to wear a hat. I can't go to therapy for you. Emotional and behavioral, they're a bit above my pay grade. So let me, at least in this video at least, we're going to go through some of the physical. But just keep in mind that emotionally and behaviorally, you have to be nice and cool. Okay? So often in my videos, I say what not to wear. I often say, don't wear this, don't wear that, because you'll look stupid. And I think it is a lot easier to say what not to wear than it is to say what to wear, because people look very different in different things, as I've said before. And I think this is why trends do not work, because you have lots of different people trying to pull off the same thing. Not everyone looks good in blonde locks, but the people who pull it off really well. This is the core reason why I think I'm addressing in this video the things that you need to get right before you work on your outfit, because in reality fashion is far too subjective to say do this and do that, which is why I quite like talking about fashion without actually saying this is what's cool. At the same time, I think it's a lot easier to blanket things with being uncool than it is to being cool. In saying that, for example, skinny jeans take a lot of the hit online. Skinny jeans, yes, worn in a certain fashion in a certain way are pretty bad, but I think this has soiled the name of skinny jeans, because when we look at sort of like the indie rock stars with the Converse, that's a vibe. It's just far too subjective. It's vast. It's completely vast, and you can't encompass it all. So yes, anyway, things that you can change about yourself. Of course you can change your behavior, but as I say, that's your therapist's job. Looking again at our hierarchy, it doesn't matter anything else if they are not clean. So you need to smell nice. Not necessarily nice, okay, but you need to at least start by smelling clean, neutral, like a neutral flavor. You need to start with a neutral, clean base. Perfume, and when you start going into eau de toilette, eau de parfum, eau de cologne. Cologne is not French. Cologne is a city in Germany. Perfume is a multiplier. It's not an addition. Anything multiplied by 0 is still 0. You can't polish a turd. Perfume will not mask a bad scent. You need to start by showering, putting on deodorant, and then you can go into your choice of perfumery, fragrance. And actually, I'm going to do a full video on perfume, which I'm very excited about. Okay, yes. Anyway, another olfactory consideration you may want to make is smoking. This is why our hierarchy here is very important. This sort of physical at the bottom, you will not pass to the next level if you do not complete cleanliness final boss. Smoking. Let's not lie now. It can look cool. Why do people do it? Because it looks cool. Okay, it can look cool. If you're doing it in this kind of way, yes, you look cool. If you're kind of huddling in the rain outside of a hospital, maybe not quite as cool. The mysterious person at the bar with a cigarette by themselves is quite cool. However, look at our hierarchy here. If you smell of smoke, it's not even smoke, it's just the smell of cigarettes. I don't smoke. Don't smoke, kids, because you stink. It doesn't matter how cool it looks, because people are not going to get over the fact that you just don't smell clean. You don't smell clean, you don't feel clean. Yellow fingernails and things like that everyone warns you about on the packet of a cigarette. It's real. It is real. So consider that. And then with the vapes, I also don't vape. I've never vaped. Yes, it may smell nice. It smells like sweets. However, it's not cool. You may pass the bottom level, and if you're nice enough, yes, that's also fine, but you don't pass the top level because vaping just isn't cool. If you vape, you're just a loser. Don't smoke, don't vape. Be clean, smell nice. That's what I can say to that. that. So hopefully with that advice, you will pass the clean level. And then we go on to nice and cool. Obviously you have to be nice. I can't tell you to be nice. You just have to be nice. And if you're not a nice person, then it sucks for you and sucks for everyone else as well. Then we have cool. When we're looking at someone being cool, there's an overlap between attraction and source. Someone with the source doesn't mean that you're sexually attracted to someone. However, I do think that this sort of like cool aura swag at the top of the hierarchy is at the top of the pyramid for a reason, because if someone isn't cool, you don't fuck with them. For example, a little analogy: you're fingering Hinge, you're swiping on Hinge. Is the word. I find lovely boy, charming young man, very good looking. However, he has 5 pictures of a selfie in a bathroom, and the 6th picture is a topless picture in the gym. It's not cool. What kind of compatibility will we have? I don't go to the gym. I don't poop. I'm a lady. So that's another, that's another aspect of the source, which I know a lot of people talk about on the internet, is that you have to be interesting. You have to have interests. And I do think that is important, but you can't just say, go and find an interest, because that's ridiculous. You can't just find an interest. You need to actively try things out and see what you like. So yes, if you want to have the source, those are the things that you may want to consider. It's been a pleasure being here. I will see you soon. Oh, has that been there the whole time?
Oh. Ah. Mmm. That's it, I'm not going.